the Democratic Republic of Congo is the latest country to have joined the East African community, and this was last year in March. So that means that in just a few days from now, they shall be making their first anniversary as a member of the federation or of the community, depending on what choice of words you prefer. But whereas so much excitement came with their entrance, because issues around their population, and really there were positive energies that were surrounded with their entrance, issues around market and many other factors. But also we know that their entrance comes with a security burden on the community, and shall explore that much more, because we know that the community has tried to have certain peace resolution mechanisms to address the issues in Eastern Congo, that is Goma. But well, we shall explore those efforts and evaluate their success. But also later on, we know that yesterday the president made his address to the country. So in the second half of this conversation, we shall pick out what key areas the president focused on in his address. But just to kick us off is a panel of immaculate senior citizens of this country that it's always my pleasure to introduce to you. From the extreme left is retired Major Awich Pollar. He is a regular on this show and is the Director of External Relations at the National Resistance Movement Secretariat. Retired Major, happy to have you once again.
Thank you, thank you. Greetings to our viewers. Nice to be with you.
All right.
The Director, Eternal Relations. He removed the X.
Thank you very much, retired Major. Good to have you. Next to myself is Dr. Sarah Bireete. Sarah is the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance. Doctor, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
All right. Next to Sarah and our guest today is Edgar Tabaro, who is a lawyer, but also we know that he does very good work for us as a country in Sudan. Edgar, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Kidega. It's a pleasure. Good afternoon to our viewers.
Since you have the microphone, I'll just begin with you. I don't know, even before we go into the nitty-gritties of the peace process in DRC Congo, I don't know, how does one country find itself in this continuous conflict, year in, year out? And even with the efforts of SADC and the EAC, the conflicts are just unending. I don't know, is there more than meets the eye in DRC Congo?
Very often when conflict in the Congo is being talked about, there's the elephant in the room that people always cut around. But on this occasion, Kinshasa has pointed the fingers in the right direction. We've had also the Western powers, France, Belgium, the EU, United States, also coming out very firmly and pointing fingers towards that elephant. It's only the UK, and I know the politics behind that has been a little bit mute on that. But we are very much aware that there's an ease over this. There are also those endemic issues in the DRC that have their background in how the DRC was created after the Berlin Conference as a private enterprise for King Leopold, and various migration patterns, and how they cobbled up many communities in an area the size of Western Europe. We're talking of 2,444,000 square kilometers, meaning that the DRC is the size of Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, Kenya, and half of South Sudan put together. That is the area that is called the DRC. Now, there's the eastern side of the DRC, which linguistically and culturally is very different from the rest of the DRC. The lingua franca there is mainly Kiswahili, and there are more social and culturally, and by extension, although this one is not said very loudly, politically connected with the rest of East Africa, in particular Uganda and Rwanda. I happen to come from a border community myself. My parents are we were born in the present-day Chisoro district So when you go to the DRC, you'll find people with my names. The Minister for Infrastructure, Muvunyi Gisaro, is my namesake. I'm called Muvunyi.
On DRC?
In the DRC, their Minister for Foreign Affairs is called Adubango. He's an Alur. When he's traveling to his village, he comes through Entebbe, flies to Arua, then drives across to his home district. So we are more. The eastern of the DRC is very much linked to the rest of East Africa. Now, unfortunately, within the politics of the DRC, in 1977 there was an attempted coup against Mobutu. Up to 1977, Mobutu had run a fairly efficient state. He had paved a number of roads. He opened up the rest of the country by, I think, built around over 103 aerodromes, so as to make it air-linked, that large mass air-linked. He built rails, built waterways, opened waterways for transportation, expanded the port at Matadi to handle large exports, although it's still problematic up to this day. But I started on the Kikwit Dam, the Inga Dam, Kikwit as well, 5,000 megawatts. Many things are done, but the coup d'etat ushered in an era, both era with ERA and ERROR, and an era in the DRC where Mobutu took to voodooism as a measure of control of his country. So he created many divisions in the country as a method of administration, divide and rule. So the Eastern DRC fell into a place of statelessness, absence of the effective state control there. So with the absence of effective state control, which continues up to this day, they emerged militia. And the militia are aligned, and this is where I'm disagreed with the chairman of Major Awich. He makes a correct diagnosis, but his prognosis is what I'm disagreed with. The militia forces that we see in the DRC are not necessarily negative forces. Many of them arose as a result, actually, all of them arose as a result of absence of an effective state there. So they came as a vigilante, usalama, community initiative to respond to lawlessness in that part of the country. But unfortunately, the militias, and we're talking of 133 militia forces in that part of the country. So many of them are ethnic and sub-ethnic, representing those smaller groups, including sub-ethnic groupings. As such, they are not necessarily negative forces, but ideologically are lacking in cohesion and articulating a national agenda. So in relation to that, some of these militia groups are mainly soldiers of fortune and people you'd call mercenaries. They're at the service of the wheeler dealers in the region and the international mafia world. They access minerals through those militia forces. These militia forces collect revenue. They sell gold, diamond, coltan, and lately lithium, which are some of the most demanded, sought after items. You are aware with the trade, with the volatility of the international currencies, particularly the US dollar, gold has become more tradable. An ounce of gold, a kilogram of gold, a year ago, you would get for about 36,000 US dollars. It's now going for about 56, and will soon hit $60,000. So, and there is this elephant in the room that exploits that situation. One, through its affinity, cultural affinity, kindredship, by language and proximity. I'll be very careful not to mention the country, not to upset the man in charge of international relations, external relations of the NRM. But that country runs what they call a Lebensraum policy. It can only thrive by being a predator on the resources from the DRC. And it is one of the major destabilization forces, one of the major destabilization rings in the Eastern DRC. It uses those militia forces for purposes of appropriating what you read in UN reports, plunder, pillage. That's the word. That's the wording I see in these UN reports. And there's a UN report that was released, I think, on the 14th. Today is the 16th.
Yes, today is 16th.
2 days ago, there's a report that was released by the UN Security Sanctions Committee, and I mean they are all. It's mentioning all. It's mentioning, and on this occasion, retired Polar Major Awich's army is missing in the UN reports, which I think is a positive development.
Even before they mentioned us erroneously. Even before we were mentioned erroneously.
Well, but at least there's a court judgment to that effect. I don't know whether the court judgment is erroneous, but I also have issues with that court judgment, by the way. UPDF, they just didn't manage it diplomatically, and you know how we lost out on that diplomatic front when we were negotiating with the President Kabila. You remember,
Yes.
Madam Sarah? That case, yes, Uganda's equipment was used by another army to commit those offenses. And why Uganda didn't is what shocks me. But well, that's a conversation for another time. But for a long time, for a pretty long time, the information that you get from refugees who come from that part of the DRC is that UPDF is exemplary in its behavior. I mean, I've not been there with the UPDF, but I'm giving you as information I've gathered from
That's
the refugees.
very true.
From the refugees.
That's very true.
And I worked very closely with the late Chef Ali when we were in the same discussion group with you at Makerere, and he's a man I looked up to and did a lot of work in that area. But to sum it all, Mr. Kidega, the rest of the DRC gave up on the Eastern DRC. They just see them as people belonging to a different culture. Even the culinary behaviors are very different from the rest. The other part of the DRC, by the way, they eat baboons, they eat monkeys. On this side, they are cattle keepers, they eat fish. They speak Kiswahili, that's why they speak Lingala. They even dress differently. So, in the eyes of the rest of the DRC, they long gave up on what? On the Eastern DRC. You remember the talk we used to have when we were growing up that Uganda shall not wait for Karamoja to develop, which I also find very terribly disturbing that there was that thinking in Uganda and seems to be replicated in these Mabati scandals of ours, that we shall not even wait, we shall not help them to develop. So that's the same attitude the DRC has of that country. And in fact, all this conflict is seen as something far withdrawn from them. The rest of the country, Lubumbashi, are thriving. Goma, it's under siege, they are not bothered.
But then I want to ask just a follow-up on that, is that do these people in Goma, do they participate in the electoral processes of the general country? Like, do they vote, for example?
I'm glad you've asked that bit. In the last election, elections were not conducted in that part of the country. Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri, there were no elections that were conducted in that country. And in fact, they are under direct administration because they have what you'd call a semi-federal structure. The provinces have their own governors who are elected by the what? By the local. Yeah. Then they also elect what they call deputies. They elect deputies who are called parliamentarians. Now, North Kivu has 15. In the previous election, they had 15. In the other election, the one preceding, the one that brought Tshisekedi to power, they had 15 seats in the National Legislative Assembly. On this occasion, no elections were conducted in that part of the country because of the insecurity. And remember, I'm giving you the background of Mobutu also having divided them further. And the same system has continued. But It's a discussion I'll pick on later.
Yeah, much more later. Yeah, thank you. I want to bring in Sarah. Sarah, as you hear Council Edgar trying to bring out the historical perspective, I want us to evaluate deeply the aspect of the minerals in Congo. I don't know. So I've heard people who have said that Congo's biggest misfortune is, in fact, the fortune that it has. The minerals that Edgar tried to mention, the lithium, gold, timber, and all these things. So how has mineral become a source of, for example, conflict? I don't know, could we evaluate that? But also, Edgar mentioned Mobutu, but also perhaps we could look at Patrice Lumumba and his kind of leadership and of course, the way he ended up being assassinated and all these things. So I don't know, are there some things that we are not talking about effectively?
You know, I think we need to put the context clearly by asserting that the conflict has both internal and external aspects. Internal is the misgovernance, divide and rule, you know, impartial or unequitable development that Edgar tried to talk about, and the disparities with the complexity of the size, of course, the size of the country itself. Weak institutions, weak leadership, and all the contradictions, including the politics of exclusion when it comes to minority ethnicities like Banyamulenge and the rest. And that has constantly divided the country. But there are external factors where now the minerals come in and the natural resources in general. Because the endowment of DRC as a country, it's not just the minerals. Inga Dam can power electricity to the whole of Africa and Europe if fully developed. And you have the thick forests, you have the timber. So it's not just the minerals. That attracts exploitation. So a combination of misgovernance and the natural resources creates a vacuum for predators. And the majority of these are foreigners. First, you have the internal confusion and the misgovernance where you have people taking over territory and individuals can trade in the richness of a country because you are not properly in charge. So the militias you hear about in the Eastern DRC, more than 133 militias, control territory and they are able to sustain the territory using mineral resource because they can individually trade in the rich, you know, endowment of a nation without following proper procedures of trade and taxation because of the corrupt governance structure in Eastern DRC. So when you have the grid of the people who depend on minerals in DRC, with some of them based in Israel, US, we have had two decisions in Britain. So they are scattered all over the world, but mainly Europe and developed countries exploiting the minerals in DRC. And with the gaps internally. And that has sustained instability, even with the manner in which some of these people rise to power. The overthrow of Lumumba, you talked about Patrice Lumumba, who worked so hard for the stability and liberation of Africa and became a threat to the then colonial powers that decided to eliminate him because of his vision and the kind of leadership he would have offered, not only to DRC. I always admire the manner in which the founding fathers of Africa were able to collaborate, to write, send telegrams, make sure messages are going even in difficulties with no developed means of communication. But they would move, coordinate, mobilize, and they were able to liberate the continent. Us, given all the technology we have, exposure, and all the means, including modern transport, we are failing, for example, to properly integrate East Africa and Africa. And so when you compare, I always say that it's like human race is developing in there are some elements of human race that we have lost as we access more education, more technology. You find that the abilities of the people like the likes of Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, Nyerere, and the quality of leadership that they would offer, you can't find it today in Africa. Which leader would you compare with Mwalimu Nyerere, man?
Museveni.
Today?
Museveni.
Are you joking?
Serious.
Please,
I'll substantiate I'll substantiate what I'm saying.
You have the opportunity.
Yes. So when you look at the ideals these people stood for, the selflessness within which, it was leadership beyond self. I know Genomuntu talks about that, but I don't know whether we can see it. And they were not interested in enriching themselves. Neither were they interested in holding on to power. That generation, I think, ended with Mandela. And even when he announced that he was leading for one term, some people could not believe as to how you could sacrifice 27 years of your prime time in the bush, what I would call the bush prison, because I want to compare with the bush claims
in
here.
South Africa.
I want to compare with the bush claims here.
In South Africa, you're right, the context.
Yes.
Having served time in Robben Island
Yes.
is a sign that you like we are always reminded
we sacrificed.
the battles of Kasunga, Nyanja. For them, it's how many rocks they dug when they were at Robben Island.
And then you come
The difference being that they took power through an election. This had to do it through an extra constitutional means.
Election was a formality. Election was a formality in South Africa. They really fought for it.
So the struggle for independence in South Africa, the struggle to end apartheid, and 27 years, and you come, first of all, you share power. I remember that shared in Nobel Peace Prize. You share power with the oppressor for 2 years.
He was the deputy president until...
Yeah,
but the
for about 2 years.
The National Party eventually merged with the ANC.
No, but the first act was sharing power.
But they eventually merged.
That came gradually.
I mean, it is, imagine...
Yes, and
the apartheid party and the anti-apartheid struggle, they eventually merged.
That caliber of leadership. Then you come to power and you say, I will lead for one term. Nothing has stopped you. You have popular support globally, not just in South Africa. You have, the constitution is not limiting you, but you want your nation to transit to another leadership. So that caliber of leadership. So when my neighbor and friend Edgar Tabaro says Museveni, we are always reminded of sacrifices in 5 years. Even the cause alone is today contested. You fought because of a rigged election, but you are the master confuser of elections. And then you want to rub it in about the rigged elections, you rig, you kidnap. The army just in the recent by-election in Soroti closed the polling station, and then he entered and ticked ballots. So even when you are saying you sacrifice to do more thuggery than the one you were fighting. And for 5 years, you are, milking the nation for 37 years. So when you compare, really, using the words of the late Garang, I think we should sort out who the true revolutionaries of Africa are from the fake revolutionaries.
And Garang's vision was to have a united Sudan and an integrated East Africa from Port Sudan to
And he
Matadi.
had a solid vision.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I'll give you the background to that, where those debates started. It was at Dar es Salaam University.
Yes. He was solid. It's unfortunate that he didn't live to see what he was fighting for. So if you look at that caliber of leadership, the caliber of citizenry, and the active citizen, because these were you African students, mainly in Europe, who read the cause for Africa. So the caliber of active citizenry, the caliber of citizens then, the caliber of leadership, I think we are growing in a degeneration curve as Africa on the governance and the leadership front.
Retrogression.
Yes, on the leadership front.
But is it only the leadership? But I also find it, sorry if I'm interrupting.
No, please.
She's intrigued me, but I think it's not so much about the leadership. I think I would like to engage in what I would call introspection. The leaders emerge out of conditions give rise to leaders. I quite frankly find the thinking of the so-called elite, or the people I'd call the intelligentsia in Africa, very, very worrying. The things we discuss even in our exclusive WhatsApp groups, it is extremely worrying. I'm trying very much not to discuss the ongoing scandal in Uganda, but that's a reflection of who we are. And quite frankly, the next election...
The monkey grab.
Yeah, the next election we even return. And it's the same thing that is being replicated elsewhere in Africa. It is very, very worrying. But the saving grace is that in some countries like South Africa, you find persons of our age, not just articulate, but, and you see the contestation. An election in the ANC for office bearers is not a mere election. It is the election. Yeah. And you see people of substance offering themselves for leadership. Now in Uganda, even the professional bodies, that's what I'm saying, the civil society, the professional bodies. And I don't want to single out any professional body for purposes of not offending certain sensitivities on this show. But you've seen the leadership that is also emerging in the professional bodies. There's nothing to talk about.
Why don't you mention?
Nothing to talk about. I'm telling you,
there's nothing to write about.
Nothing to write about. And believe me, it will have to take us hitting real rock bottom and a rude awakening for us to get out of there. The way things are, and that is the leadership that is emerging in East Africa. Although the thinking of these leaders, and when you talked about Garang, I'm reminded of the Dar es Salaam. They had a study group at Dar es Salaam, and they were influenced by the likes of Walter Orodini, that Guyanese academic and thinker, Professor Shamireri, How Europe and the Developed Africa. There was Fan Santima,
the
Mondlane of Mozambique. But they had a discussion group at Dar es Salaam. Franz Fanon, Amaral Cabral, Agustino Neto, and they used to discuss at Professor Kanyani. Kanyani was the dean of Faculty of Law for a long time. There was Professor Nabudere, Professor Shivji, Shamiarida, who supervised Museveni's thesis on violence, political violence, and what was the title? And it's is it eradication or is it deepening? Deepening political violence.
Political violence as a tool of liberation.
As a tool of liberation, and as a tool of liberation. Franz Fanon's theory. And it shaped their thinking that intellectually, these guys are Pan-Africanists. Intellectually. But when you go to observe each one of them, the paths they've taken, if you are to plot a curve, you will find material that supports the fact that they made every attempt to push the agenda of integration. But I also find many contradictions that actually pierce the assertion that they were for East African integration. So and these contradictions are some of the things we are now seeing. Because when you go to the DRC, the accusation against Uganda and Rwanda is that it's a purely ethnic agenda.
Yeah. But the same was written about by Marim Nyerere in his last days. He was uncomfortable about the Himatusi Empire. And in the Marim Nyerere symposia that was held in Kampala, the President Museveni had to present a paper defending himself against what Nyerere thought, that the President Museveni was creating a Himatusi empire in the Great Lakes region. So it is not that it is something out of nowhere. People had seen it, developing, emerging,
I was
deliberate.
careful not to mention, but she has the
The courage.
she has the nerve.
I think that's why we are here, that we share what we know. So there is a whole paper written by President Museveni on the archives of Marim Nyerere Foundation on his defense against the Himatusi Empire. And there is also Marim Nyerere's manuscript on why he thought President Museveni was creating a Himatusi Empire in the Great Lakes region and the dangers it would pose. And the dangers have come to pass. One of them is the DRC conflict, where Rwanda and Uganda stuck. In the, Rwanda openly defending the Tutsi, Banyamurenga and the Tutsi people staying in DRC, and that's part of the cause of the current conflict. In DRC, when you talk about M23, majority of M23 fighters are Tutsi.
And where did they come from to go and fight?
I don't know.
Where were they?
Where were they living before?
Before they went to
I have to
fight
bring
again.
in-
I want her to. She has information that we don't have.
I have to bring in retired Major. He has been quite. He has been
Observing.
quiet and just observing. Retired Major.
Retired Major will not mention Vihanga and M23.
Retired Major, just two things from me. Is that one, of course, I'll give you an opportunity to explore the historical context that we find ourselves discussing today, which is the conflict in DRC, but also perhaps we try to step a foot into the possible resolutions that have been tried to pacify DRC. We know that the UPDF has a Pan-Africanism outlook or ideology towards things, and that's why we find our
It's their central doctrine.
yeah.
The doctrine is Pan-Africanism.
And that's why we find the UPDF on several occasions. Like, for example, we have Operation Shuja that is in DRC Congo. So the historical context in your own words, but also the role that Uganda is playing in pacification of DRC.
Fine, thank you so much. I just like to start by, your question also ties up with what my colleagues have been discussing. Why war all the time? And it's the same way like saying why conflict. I like to start from a point of departure that Karl Marx says man lives for production of his materials, production of his own species, reproduction of his own species, and the production of his material needs. That's a point of departure. And when you looked around all conflicts, it revolves around that. You don't say that in Israel, the Jews don't love Arabs just because one is a Jew, one is Arab. It must be centered around materiality. You can't say, for example, in Liatonde, where there are Banyankole and Baganda, that Baganda don't like Banyankole and Banyankole don't like Baganda. It must be around materiality if any conflict arose. Either conflict for grazing land, conflict for water for cattle, or conflict for land for cultivation.
Or for control of the land.
Yeah. So, materiality is the point I'm trying to raise. So in DRC, of course, as society lives there, and society, you're talking of people living there or people having interest there, they develop interest in their productions, production relations. So the material interest in Congo is there, and I imagine if it was dry land without anything, possibly we wouldn't have that. So we don't need to dig any far apart from the materiality in Congo, the resources available, and all forms of resources. I'm not so sure whether human resource is part of them, but maybe for the purpose of production there. But at the beginning, for now, it is the natural resources. So there is a conflict in Congo, and therefore it attracts many interests. Somebody will now come to say a particular religion was attacked, not religion. Somebody will say a particular ethnic group was attacked. That is just the symptoms. The material basis is that. Meaning that if the Banyamulenge was there and the area was even dry, nobody was even bothered about my cousin who is in the Congo called Banyamulenge. No. Religion in Middle East comes to flourish up the material conflict. The race, Jew and Arab, comes up to just smoothen up the material conflict over land. So religion, ethnicity, the material base is a conflict. So that is a conflict in Congo, and it is unfortunate, and that's why you believe that those who said their resources is a curse, that is it. So that is it, and it is to me it is a better method of tools of analysis to look at it that way. Now, ideally as a state, DRC should be able to develop its systems of controlling and harmonizing what is there. And that's the belief we have in NRM and NRA, that a state must be strong enough, not only to hold the internal cohesion of a country, but even to defend from outside. And that's why for a long time we have not had statelessness, or where there's no existence of a state, whether in Karamoja, or if it appears, it must be addressed. It must be addressed. So in the case of Congo, it would be really unfortunate to think that an external force will come and clear the situation. That would be a far-fetched thinking. It can be done, but it will not last, and it is not long-lasting. So how our brothers in Congo develop a state system where you have LC1 in every part of the village. In Uganda, there's no place where there's no LC1. And there's no place where there's no LC2. And there's no place where you don't have LC3 chairman. And there's no place where you don't have police. You have total control of a country. The other challenges, the effective use in terms of the corruption in police and the judiciary, that's another thing. But the state must be seen to be effective. And that is what DRC has to work on, the effectiveness. And that's what we believe, that for a country to be stable, it must build its own mechanism of effectiveness. Of course, the foreigners have seen, like if you talk in historical context, and Sarah was thanking so much the African leaders who came up at that time, maybe thinking we don't have now, although I still think we have. But it's worth noticing that even Pan-Africanism did not start from Africa. Pan-Africanism is a reflection of oppression against blacks in the diaspora. Possibly if blacks were not oppressed in the diaspora, we wouldn't even have felt Pan-Africanism. So Pan-Africanism was not an excitement of a feeling of Africans, loving Africans and doing all that. No, it started from America, from London, from where? Why? Because the blacks there were oppressed. So Pan-Africanism is more of a reaction than a proaction. It was a reaction suffered by the Africans in the diaspora. Then it came back to Africa. It is not born here. And therefore, the leaders then. But we should also take cognizance of the efforts by foreigners then. We may think that it is and that's why I said I agree with Edgar. Edgar, by the way, my classmate in Makere, and we went all the way. So we have known each other for long. And we have tried to involve him in progressive thinking for a long time, using the study group that we formed in Makere. So we are a long time friends.
But you remain the reactionary force. I went on to progression.
I'm a progressive. You have
General Moses calls the NRM reactionary force, and
I don't think it's right. So now, I want to say, Tabaro says that leaders emerge at a certain historical epoch. you would like to know the role played by foreigners, including the Lumumba that we are talking about. You see, in 1917, a revolution broke in Russia. Now, the socialist state came up. Now, for the socialist state to cut off capitalism, they had to struggle for anti-colonial forces to overthrow colonialism with the hope that Britain economic resource would be cut, French economic resource would be cut, Belgium economic resource would be cut. That is why Russia worked so hard to make us get independence. You can't imagine the role Soviet Union and Russia played in the independence of Africa. People used to walk from Uganda through Khartoum to Egypt to get a flight to go to Moscow.
Kari's father.
The Kayura's father. There was a trek on foot from here to go to. So we should, while we thank our African ancestors or forefathers who fought for the independence, we cannot be linked from the global forces moving then, because socialism had to fight to cut off the economic flow of capitalism. So Russia and China came on board to fight very hard. The Lumumba, most of these people, the Nyerere, our people were walking. Kajabago walked from here on foot to Cairo to get a flight to Moscow. Those were the recruitment of cadres there. So we should not look at this thing in isolation. And of course, it also goes further to the allusion. My friend made allusion that South Africans got their independence by election. Far from it. Far from it. They fought for it.
Yeah,
Did
true.
you know there was a time in '86 when we were already in power, we used to host the generals of Pan-African movement, Pan-African Congress, and African National ANC, because there are two rival
Camps.
not rival, but two forces fighting for the same cause, but they were parallel to each other. PAC believe push the whites to the ocean. ANC believe we can have a rainbow country. So they had ideological difference. But what President Museveni did was to say, since all of you are fighting for the freedom of South Africa, we shall support both of you. And we used to host them in the current Nile Hotel.
And Silver Springs.
Silver Springs.
Templeton in Tantala was the resident representative for Pan-African Congress.
Yes.
Then General Andrew Masondo.
Yes.
For, not ANC, Mokoto Esizwe. ANC was in Lusaka. You were hosting the fighting wings.
Yes, the fighting wing. So I remember I was young then, but very interested in following that.
So I was also interested.
We would hold every Sunday discussion with them in Serena, now Serena. And I asked them, I said, you are general, so on. So where is your army? You are general of what? They said, we have an invisible, then
network.
90,000 armed forces of ANC. So it's not true that they got independence through election. They had 90,000, and by the way, Zuma was the CMI.
Was the head of military intelligence.
And their war was merely intelligence-based war. Why?
No, but they did the guerrilla.
Yes, it was good. Yeah, I was saying the intelligence because you had to recruit in South Africa. Recruitment was intelligence-based recruitment. You had to smuggle out of the country. Smuggling was intelligence-based. You had to identify friends for training. You did it. So you can see the role you played. Identification of recruits, recruiting them, taking them, looking for passports. Sometimes they had to use passports of various countries, but end up in training in Uganda, in Libya, in Russia, in China, everywhere. That was his work. And they did and fought the war. So it is not true.
It was a struggle.
It was not true that they got by election.
Then the Mbekis had to
No,
move.
but what path have they taken?
Yeah.
What path have they taken?
After.
You see, the democratic ideals that the Mandelas, that Albert Sisulu, the Ora Tambo, the ideals that they set out to achieve, they set out to work towards, you can see they are still burning.
Yes, I was coming to
they're still burning in the
path they took.
So they've gone on to become progressive.
Yes.
And that is a discomfort I've always had with you, Major Awich from Makerere. You've chosen to become reactionaries.
No, we are
Instead of joining the progressive
can
process.
I build on the path that you're saying? So I just want to, now that I bring all of us to agree that it is not true that they won through election, but rather through a struggle, is that In 1986, the then frontline states, remember all the Southern African states were declared themselves frontline states because South Africa took it like they're at war with them. So South Africa had the capacity to bomb them. So they told them, if you keep your gorilla in your training, we shall bomb you. So these people had nowhere to put their recruits. Museveni said, bring them here. So when we brought them here, South Africa said, we are going to bomb you. In a cabinet meeting in State House, Adohonek Yono was a minister, urged the cabinet to pass a resolution that South African freedom fighters should be chased from Uganda. Museveni said, no, we can't chase our brothers here. Now, the only thing is that we have to strengthen our air defense system. They are men, we are men, or they are women, we are women. If they come, they will fall in Lake Victoria. So we defended, we strengthened our air defense system and kept onto our South African friends and brothers, took them Kaweta, trained them there. Incidentally, they had children among them, Kadogos. Museveni said no.
Took them to school.
He said, I'm not going to allow your Kadogos to be fighting when I've removed mine in school. I was with them in Intare school. The Kadogos of South Africa, they're now big people. I hope I'm as big as them. They are
bigger than you. You've been
saying. Now, the role of Uganda the role of Uganda in DRC is that first, as I said, Uganda believes that every state should be strong enough to maintain its stability. That is our wish. Two, we are struggling to ensure that through a bigger forum like East African Community, which as Rich Museveni keeps fighting for it, is that bring DRC within the community and use the internal system of the African community, East African community, to save them. And that's why Kenyan Army is there. To
that extent, but I'm agreed with Museveni, because after our initial debacle into the DRC, what many commentators now call, political commentators call, or pundits call the misadventure of first 99. Remember, I went there in 96 first. 96, 97 when we took over, when we installed Kabila.
The first was Obote with the gold
scandal.
That
is the gold scandal. I'm talking the recent one. The gold scandal really had its own dynamics. And I've addressed it before on this show. Believe me, Obote was also following a resolution of the Mulungushi Club between Jesus Christ, I don't know why I come to Museveni. Obote, Kenneth Kaunda, Nyerere. They formed the Mulungushi Club to support the Lumbumbists who were fighting the so-called legitimate authority in the DRC. And they were using Ugandan army to, again, access gold and other minerals for purposes of supporting the Lumumbist rebels. Fast forward 96, 97, we install Kabila, then the Kisangani 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending on which battles you look at, but the Kisangani debacles again. And Museveni came to the conclusion that the best way is to support Congolese to be in charge of themselves, take charge of their affairs.
That's what he has always said.
Yes, and I've seen
and rightly so.
Well, it's the right thing to do, but I see many contradictions in his approach.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to say.
And I would like to.
There's a difference between talk and action.
Which one? If he says a country should be capable of maintaining its own internal system, which contradiction?
And then he has, and by the way, even Shuja is premised on that.
Support Congolese to take charge of their affairs.
No, me, I want to take it further. I want to take it further. And to that extent, I really agreed with Museveni. But we know the contradictions that are arising from that. And you see, in his opinion, President Museveni says M23 is not a negative force. We know the atrocities the M23 has committed. Some of its members.
I've not heard that from him. I've heard from MK instead.
Even President Museveni.
Yeah, even there was a debate of M23 in the
Museveni
UN
says they're not a negative force.
In 2013.
That is his stand. And this is where I'm disagreeing with him. M23 has been involved in atrocities.
Then
some of its
then what's
some
the
of its
purpose?
commanders have been
M23
indicted.
What is
was
the
a
purpose
creation of Uganda and Rwanda.
Operation Shuja then?
No, Shuja is for
Actually,
Ituri.
that's why I wanted to make my conclusion. My conclusion to my
Much obliged.
conclusion.
I'll oblige. I'll be
to
charitable
the role
to
of
my own
Uganda.
comrade.
I'd already said that one, Uganda believes in a country or Congo having its internal system. Two, I said Uganda believes that bringing DRC to East Africa, you can use the East African internal mechanism to help them, and that's why the Kenyan army is there. Three, I'm saying the forces that are linked to Uganda, that is outside Uganda's jurisdiction, that pose a threat to Congo. Uganda can have an understanding with DRC, with their mandate and their consent to go and neutralize it. So these are a range of things that Uganda can do for DRC. Of course, including support at argumenting their case at international organizations, where you said in UN that concept, that understanding was not wrong. But it's already present. But
President Museveni in Pretoria condemned President Tshisekedi, asking him whether he was working for imperialists or Africans. And this is where I'm disagreed. There's no way the Congolese problem shall be resolved unilaterally, bilaterally. It has to be a multilateral approach.
Yes.
You have to have inter and intra-Congolese dialogue. The Tutsi, the Hutu have to come and sit together and talk as to identify, to dialogue for purposes of finding a compromise and building a consensus.
There's a Hutu in Congo.
Yeah, big. The majority of Hutus live in Congo. And they have leave the FDLR. We are talking of indigenous Hutus. Indigenous. And they have a 20,000 strong militia called Nyatura, headed by Brigadier Bagabo, who is deployed in Ubangi near the Central African Republic. Big force. We have the Banande who have a Konjo. We have the majority of Batoro and Banyoro live in the DRC. The CDF of DRC, the DRC army is a Mutoro, Chaligonza, General Chaligonza. So we have to have inter and intra. Inters in between and intra even within the communities themselves, because they have clans there. Then we have to have a regional approach.
Yes, and the international community.
Uganda and Rwanda are not the only countries that have legitimate security concerns in the DRC. So does Burundi, Angola, Cabinda Enclave, South Sudan, Central African Republic, and I even dare say Khartoum. Tanzania has not had so much.
It has not had destabilization,
so all these,
but it's a neighbor that has
all these regional. Then you have the international community. I'll tell you, one of the main reasons as to why the EU is taking the stand is taking on the DRC now, and that why there's a rapprochement between Kinshasa and the Western capitals, because of the adverse effects of climate change. I think we'll now all agree that climate change is no longer a buzzword, it's no longer a conspiracy, it's real. It's real. I mean, you are seeing the devastating effects of climate change. So the Congo forests, there's a mass that comes from the Atlantic Ocean and blows over the Congo forest. It's an air mass. It is warm, so it blows over the Congo forest, picks vapor, and condenses in the Ethiopian highlands, falling as relief rainfall. And 66% of the Nile waters are from the
Congo basin,
from the so-called Blue Nile, Ethiopia. 66% of the Nile waters. So that is very critical for combating ozone layer depletion and the effects of climate change. So to the Europeans, Congo, any destabilization factor in Congo directly touches on their livelihoods and survival. So there's no way you're going to resolve the issues of the DRC without all these players within regional and at multilateral level. And all these processes that we intend to engage in with the DRC, these countries in the region don't have the budget support. So the reason why what is the correct word these days? We used to say donors, development partners. I mean, they're the ones who can, I mean, right now as we talk, there's been a declaration of humanitarian assistance. 10 million people at the verge of starvation because of this destabilization in the Eastern DRC. 600,000 people have been displaced between August and today. 600,000. And it is so bad that the children are dying in hordes. Why? It is the cold. The cold has set in. And when they are exposed to adverse weather conditions, what they call it exposure to cold. So you need intervention strategies from, medic teams and what have you, having given makeshift, are they called theaters and ICUs or high dependence units. So there's been a call for $2 billion. And many times when we're talking about the conflict in the DRC, for some reason, we only tend to think of the Rwandaphones, the Kinyarwanda speaking people. Believe me, people in Ituri are butchering another. People in Ituri are butchering another. There's besides ADF and M23, which are the most, and FDRI, which are the most known militia forces, there's the Codeco. They are Mai.
No, they are a total of
133, but they are wreaking havoc. They are wreaking havoc.
Documented
But you say
militias.
they are
the
wreaking havoc.
Congolese think it is the affairs of the East.
Yes.
And yet you're saying the magnitude is so high.
It is so high.
And why do they, what is the contradiction between the high magnitude and the thinking that it is their Karamoja?
Unfortunately, I'm going to
Their
have
Karamoja.
unfortunately I have to delve into some of these very ugly scenarios. You remember when we had insurgents in the northern part of Uganda, and you remember the indifference of the rest of Ugandans. And you remember the kind of words they
But
speak.
it's
That,
the indifference we have with Karamoja. Why are you going in the past?
I know I'm trying to avoid the Mavati debate.
No, but we have indifference about Karamoja and famine. We are not looking at Mavati. You can look at famine in
So
Mavati.
yeah, I mean,
And development.
people are there dying.
Yeah.
Or you have
And backwardness.
or you have Karamajong, intertribal clashes, interclan clashes.
Yeah.
I don't in Karamoja, and you have and you have people say that madness of the Karamajong, that indifference, and you even call the whole Karamajong criminals. No, that is, and that is the thinking.
Like if you have Matheniko clashing with
the GA. Yes.
And you said it is their
it's
their confusion.
And the Pokot fighting the Bokora. The same thing in the DRC. But even within the Eastern DRC, many people tend to think that the Hutus and Tutsis are divided. In that country, the elite, the people they call the Goma elite, the RCD, remember RCD, L'Assemblée Congolais de, that party RCD, those French acronyms over there. They are working together because elections.
Liberation movement.
RCD, remember the RCD Goma, the one that had been created by Rwanda to wrestle it from late Diawamba and of course Mzee Museveni. So now these guys, Professor, but was it Diawamba person?
Yes, Jean-Pierre Bemba.
I don't know when but you were at Bakere with me. It was Mayomba who rescued him by carrying him in his boot, first on his back on his book. But the RCD Goma, in the previous legislature, when they held the elections, RCD Goma had 11 seats out of the 15 seats from North Kivu in the National Assembly. Now, this time around, no elections were carried out in that part of the country because of insecurity. So what these
Did they retain the seats?
Now, this is what I'm telling you. Now the Hutu and Tutsi guys realized that if they didn't speak the same language at the national level, nobody will listen to them. But because they want to access goodies in Kinshasa, they decided to come what?
Unite.
Oh, they unite. They speak the same language in Kinshasa. In fact, they have denounced Rwanda and the M23 on this occasion.
That's good.
So yeah, but you see, these are not sustainable. These things are not sustainable. You need all these intricate forces, intricate interests to sit at a round table, break out into sessions, do side meetings, but they have to sit together. And this idea of Rwanda thinking it can go it alone to solve the insecurity or their security threats will not work.
So we need a broad-based approach.
Bilateral, multilateral, and intra and inter-Congolese dialogue built into a consensus. We should not fail to dialogue. We should not refuse to dialogue. After all, dialogue builds consensus. If you fail to dialogue, you'll never build consensus.
That's right.
And it takes leadership, and I want these reactionary forces in this region to wake up to that reality. We are becoming a laughing stock. Does Somalia still make news anymore about their violence? It has become commonplace. Do you ever hear about news in the clashes in the South Sudan? It has become commonplace. Central African Republic no longer making it to the news. Why? Those are Africans doing what? Killing themselves, confused and doing what they do best.
And Ukraine?
But you see,
They are not making. They are not.
did you hear what the prince said, that this is Ukraine, it's not Africa? You remember those statements? So we Africans have created the impression that
we are barbaric.
We are primordial, and our political differences are resolved through wars, and we are not helping it. People in our space, the elite in Africa, have made the impression.
But how
that
do we treat each other before the impression?
Our major preoccupation, especially of our leaders in Africa, the major preoccupation of our leaders in Africa is to cause as much pain, and as much pain and hurtful infliction of pain and hurt on its populace.
Infliction
The African leadership.
Infliction of pain, hurt, fear, and suffering.
I even dare say we Africans are the authors of our own misery.
No, that
we are authors of our own misery.
You see, that assertion is not correct.
Because but there is evidence.
No.
Let us
have it on.
What is the contemporary? What is the contemporary debate? Mavati. You still Mavati relief items from a dying population.
And stolen by cabinet. Not people on the streets.
We Africans should learn to take responsibility for our affairs and our mistakes, our commissions and omissions. And we are failing with the elite. And the leadership is emerging from our people.
You know, the problem of Africa, moderator, I've been quiet for a while.
For us in NRM, under the leadership of Museveni, we are guided by our cardinal principles of the party. We have 4 cardinal principles. Okay? And that is far from what you're saying.
Inflicting fear.
2, we are guided by our strong constitution, which has Article 44, which literally
gives safeguards,
which lifts a Bill of Rights.
Yes.
So you can't say
gives safeguards against
in this situation where the state is strong,
yes,
where we have our strong 4 pillars of the NRM party, where we are strongly guided by Article 44 to say we instill fear. Which fear?
But what is the conduct of the regime?
Give the exception.
Major Awich. I was talking about
South Africa. I was talking about the exception.
I was talking about
but I had exception in Major. When you are kidnapping and torturing people, I had exception.
But Councillor Edgar, earlier on, you made the assertion that President Museveni is actually one of those revolutionary and exceptional leaders. I am not surprised that you are putting Uganda in the context
of
not
granting
African states.
Exception.
Because earlier on, and you said you would substantiate your...
Yes, I would substantiate.
He has substantiated, and the difference is the same. I wanted to say...
Mr. Kidega, I think you're really cutting me out of context. I said he's given leadership, and I said intellectually he's there, and I gave his background that formed his cosmology. The debates he had at Dar es Salaam.
But some actions
but you see, President Museveni is deeply schooled and believes in political violence. He has never declared an invitation to do political violence if you come against him.
And he has even said it on several times that he operates better in chaos.
When Edgar says a quotation out of context, I really instead find him quoting him out of context. What he's referring to was a thesis in Dar es Salaam University. It was like, put it in local sense, like a dissertation he wrote. Okay? The dissertation he wrote was to justify, remember that time then,
which he has implemented in
the colonial countries of Africa and how you can use violence to liberate them. In other words, he was saying you can't go and beg the Portuguese, kindly leave Mozambique. You can't go and beg the Portuguese in Angola, please, we beg you to hand over independence. For him, he was saying violence, which is the tool for liberation then, was the only way that could liberate. And he was talking of violence which creates awareness and confidence in the people. For example, if the people saw that the white person in a white Mozambique, which an ordinary African thought they were semi-gods, could actually be killed in the battlefield by Africans fighting. So that is the violence that Museveni said would liberate Africa.
How did he graphically put it?
So Africa,
how did he graphically put it? Explaining that the Muzungu you can decolonize the mind of the African. What did you do to the Muzungu's dead body?
That illustration is there.
We are men. We are agreed. We are agreed. And unfortunately, you've reduced the discussion to the NRM, and this is where I always have problems with you.
No,
we are looking at a wider picture.
Look, because you put the generals that all African leaders are there to create fear.
I didn't say not all African leaders. I said the emerging African leadership.
Okay, then if the exception is there, I can sleep. If you give the exception, then I can sleep.
But who are the people he props in the region? Are they the most democratic people he props in the region?
Like in which?
Do we give names?
You see, our intervention, our interventions for liberation are well known in South Sudan and other places, but it is really the objective is to create freedom for the people. Then the people decide for themselves.
And I'm saying there are contradictions in that. We find, and I've given Congo as one area of contradiction.
We are due for a short commercial break, but thank you, gentlemen, and of course, Lady Dr. Sarah. Well, our viewers hope that you're loving this conversation, but importantly is that we would love to interact with you. There is a comment section right below this YouTube channel. Give us your views, give us your opinions, but above all, don't move a muscle. See you shortly after this.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Thank you for staying with us, and we'll be back from that short commercial break. Dr. Sarah, I'm sure you have a couple of comments to make, but as you do so, Edgar brought in the perspective of, this should not be a one-shoe-fit-all and that we need multi-sectoral players, both domestic and global. But we have MONUSCO that has been in DRC for a very long period of time. The DRC chaired the African Union for, I think that's still the current chair of the African Union, President Felix. So I don't know, where do these international organizations come in?
The chair of African Union?
Pardon?
Felix
Tshisekedi,
yes.
Just come. Oh, yes.
No, he chaired in the second year of his
this term. So
his term.
Yeah, so we have DRC chairing African Union, then you have MONUSCO in DRC. I don't know, how do you find ourselves with all this conflict? But also your general comments.
Well, but one is that of course DRC is part of the global community and a member of the UN, United Nations.
Yeah.
So they are entitled to protection when the conflict has reached that level that requires UN Security Council intervention. There has been a UN force, I think now going into 25 years in the current conflict, starting with MONUC, which was later upgraded to MONUSCO. The international force deployment, the international deployment by UN is governed by two principles. One is that you must not be part or having an interest in the conflict. And the second issue, the impartiality test. So when you go to UN Security Council deployments, most of the neighboring countries cannot qualify to contribute troops to the UN force. The first MONUC force faced challenges of terrain. It was mainly composed of Portuguese and people from South America who could not really find their way in the thick forests and the weather. And so they had to adjust on so many spheres. And later they failed really to manage the terrain, especially the forces that had come from Portugal then. But also they have the language dilemma, most of them. They have the challenges, getting information from community. Some of the civilian, the people relations that help in security gathering, and they need to work with the local forces in most cases. But also their terms of reference are different. The MONUC force was not supposed to fire or even engage in any firing situation. They were mainly observers, and that's why the contingent was upgraded to MONUSC, which can later fight, but in self-defense or protection of citizens. But they have also faced a number of challenges because of the context within which they find themselves in. 133 militias, you have the people, the routers, the conflict entrepreneurs also grabbing minerals, jets flying in and out. In DRC, Eastern DRC, you had refined roads. That's why Uganda was trying to make a budget for road construction, because the people who pick minerals come in private jets, and all they need is a space to land on. And the people selling the minerals are able to reach where the plane is. They don't go through any customs or anything. Just fly in and out, and they don't need roads. So you have that kind of dilemma that is really complex. And at one time, I know MONUC was accused also of engaging in illegal trade.
You've seen some of their vehicles driving to Mombasa.
Illegal trade, both of arms and the minerals. So there are those challenges really with the international deployments. The comments I wanted to make in addition to what my colleagues have shared is that Uganda's interests have over time in DRC been overspread, including clear interests on regime change. Kabila Senior had his roots in Kampala, clear roots, but we also attempted to install Jean-Pierre Bemba, who ended up in the ICC. And so we have not been purely innocent and wishing DRC to manage their affairs without these other works that have led us also, among others, into the International Court of Justice condemnation and the money that we are paying in reparations.
No, I think that was done in error. Uganda was not culpable.
Individuals, not Uganda as a country, but you can bet we have, the case was heard, it went on appeal, and only what we managed was a reduction of a sentence. We didn't manage to get an acquittal.
But you know very well how that case proceeded to a hearing.
I know, but that was Uganda. That's what we had to offer.
It was failure of diplomacy.
Yes, but that's what we had to offer as a country. We deployed our best, and our best messed up at the highest level.
Were they our best that we deployed?
Where else were they deployed? It can go back to the same debate of Chututu and what she's doing.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yes. Oh, I mean, really, but I don't want to go into that. But these are government, these are top government officials.
In that instance, they really deployed the Chututu there.
Yes, these are top government officials.
At Banjul, when they were supposed to be discussing the settlement between Uganda, Rwanda, and DRC, Rwanda sent adept diplomats who really handled the situation very well. When it came to the Ugandan team, they were not in the room. They had gone to do other things, social hour and stuff like that. Man.
Yes.
Then at the UN, you know what happened? One of our leaders, and I must emphasize, not President Museveni,
Our top leaders.
one of our top leaders in this country,
Wanted to go
no,
physical.
he addressed President Kabila in the worst way possible, calling him a boy and stuff like that.
And even wanted to go physical.
You
So,
know, it's,
but that is what we have to offer as a country
you
under
know,
President
sometimes-
Museveni.
and you see, that's why I say we the elite fail this region of ours. We know these things. Somehow we keep quiet. We don't call people. We don't hold them to account, and impunity sets in.
But also their boss doesn't take any action.
Do we hold him to account? Do we?
So,
we hold him to account?
and that's the degeneration and the regressiveness of leadership in Africa. Really, the confusion of Africa as a whole is a leadership question. And we can continue running away from it. We can continue defending our individual leaders, thinking they are superior, but even there is no evidence to demonstrate their superiority. We have to address the leadership question as Africa. We have to address the governance crisis as African people.
No,
If we
I
want-
think beyond, we have always addressed that. You've spoken, you've been outspoken for ages. You've grown in outspokenness, demanding for better governance. But I think critically, there are things we need to go back to the drawing board and work on. The most important thing is the mindset. The mindset. We need to work on our mindset. We have a defeatist mindset. We have a mindset that has self-doubt. We have a mindset of the things are, you studied that what is the, how do you-
Things are already spoiled.
So
Let's just spoil.
so people are resigned that if we can grab, let me grab whatever is left, and you know, that's the mindset of the African elite. That's the mindset of a typical Ugandan now. And unless that mindset is corrected and reset to factory settings and populated to the right hubs, we are going to continue in this spiral of violence, of state collapse in the region, you know, and the predators, the international predators, will come
They
and
take advantage of our confusion, and you cannot blame them. They are the ones confusing you.
The human race, the globe is a really competitive world, and I mean, now we have been in the fourth industrial revolution, where robotics, artificial intelligence, quantum physics, and the physical world are interacting, and people are creating solutions for existing human problems, and they're enabling capital and labor to move across frontiers without you being physically present. Now, that is the stage at which the world, the globe is playing. We in Uganda.
Fifth industrial
We are going for
revolution.
the fifth industrial revolution.
Yes, when here
And
we are
here in Uganda,
still Stone Age
I mean,
actors.
we are in the region, Rwanda is going to grab minerals in the DRC. I mean, we are just not serious people. We are not serious people.
But now,
comments here.
We are not
there's
serious people.
this issue. I don't know whether Edgar is sharing the same views with Sarah, but Sarah has consistently, not only today, raised the issue of leadership that we should tackle.
Yes.
How do we do it? My view is that, first of all, we have Ugandans born, educated by their parents, not formal education. Okay, we always know that your first teacher is your parents. And then Ugandans are existing in these material conditions of interacting with each other, and they are learning and sharing challenges and joys, if any. We have also had the formal education process where we send children to school, or our current leaders have gone to school. We also have situations where our current leaders have gone through historical processes, challenges and all this, including fighting. Now, what leadership are we talking about? All we have now is, because you are not going to quantify a leader's capacity in capacityogram or capacityometer, we have now systems in place to say, for example, we have a multi-party dispensation. Leadership can be arranged in groups, and we have parties. So the leadership challenge, therefore, should first be internal in whichever organization you belong to. If you belong to NUP, pick it from among you. If you belong to UPC, pick from among you. Now for us in NRM, we pick the way we want. This is how we can get to leadership. You're not going to judge by your eye and say, I think Museveni is bad. I think so and so is. Everybody would award marks according to how one feels. Now, the laxity that you are talking about, I don't know whether we are living in the same country. For us, some of us in our organizations, we are not lax at all. We're not even sleeping. We are doing all systems to ensure that our structures work. We have challenges in structures. We are struggling even during Corona to develop systems of elections to avoid Corona, but still have elections. We are doing all work plans to go back to our people. We are ensuring that systems exist that elect leaders. So we are not sleeping. And the product of it all is that we are in power. If we were not that lax, if we are that lax, it wouldn't be. So leadership quarrel, that leadership challenge that we are having, for us we don't have, because we strongly believe.
You don't have a leadership challenge.
He was giving us information.
We do.
You don't
So I
have.
don't know where this, because
You
to
don't
say,
have a leadership challenge
to
in
say
NRM?
we have leadership
Actually,
quarrel
that's
is actually challenging that the current leadership in the country is not strong.
No,
it's
no.
not good.
Actually,
Yeah, because we are talking as if there's a vacuum with the leaders.
I talked of the mindset, Mr.
So the mindset that we're talking about,
Comrade Awich.
Can I finish this, Tabaro?
Yes, sir.
I don't know whether the mindset that you are talking is to reduce the elite into what they think either in a leisure, would that they take it like full time, talking about Arsenal and Man U, talking about this and this, and you are not you thinking that they should be talking when it comes to national issues. They should be the competence that you see reflected in African National Congress, the competence that is expressed in the cadres of PAC, or even this other man who talks, what is this?
PLL
Malema.
Malema.
Yes,
We expect it to be in the cadre of Malema. These people are just coming out of their struggle.
Have you looked at the quality of leaders? Malema's party, FFRs.
Yes.
Very serious fellows.
Yes, they're serious.
Very
But
serious
remember,
fellows.
they are just coming out of a struggle.
Okay, if I may get back my time,
is that
he was giving me information.
what we are having.
Can you conclude your information? You were
So the
taking.
information I'm giving in a nutshell is that for us in NRM and us Ugandan, there's no leadership crisis that is should be imputed to. We have a competent leader in the person of Museveni.
We're talking
And we
about
have
leaders, not. Unfortunately,
You see, we don't personalize
that is why I want to say,
Comrade Awich, you're reducing it to the person of President Museveni, and I don't want to go in that direction. President Museveni is 78.
Yes,
He's a generation over and above us. He's about 30 years older than us.
more.
I went
Okay,
down
put
to
it at that.
structures. Remember, I talked
Yes,
about
and I'm glad you're talking about
I
structures.
talked about
I
structures.
have
So I'm not talking only of Museveni. I even talked about our structures.
I have interacted with the NRM. If I may tell you, in 2014 Delegates Conference, December 14th, I participated. I was in charge of some. I was given some duties and I interacted because I accredited nearly all members of the NEC. NEC were sub-county chairperson. People had contested in, as NRM flag bearers for MP and had lost. LC5 chairpersons and what have you, all that. The NEC. Not SEC, NEC.
Not sub-county.
County.
The county delegates.
Those who had contested flag bearers and had lost.
Our
Then the
constitution
MPs
prescribes what a neck
Okay.
is.
Yes, the NEC, yeah.
Mm.
I interacted with also persons at the lower level because I had some people I knew very well, like Honorable Mavenjina, Akika Otieno. They were trying to launch comebacks to the national politics, so they were having issues of their whatever's being accredited. So I had to come from my side and go and interact with some of those groups because I knew these people at a personal level, and I had a deep interaction, and it was. You know, if you are trained in research methods like myself, you start, synthesizing information through observation and anecdotes. And quite frankly, if that is the leadership we have for this country, because NRM attracts some of the best, it also attracts some of the worst. But if I'm to take that as the average, as the leadership for this country, believe me,
we are in a crisis.
whichever religion you subscribe to, darken your knees in prayer.
Okay.
It's good it has not come from you. So
let's
I will not add
let's hear
on,
from
because
Sarah.
I
No,
will
but
add
let me say
on one
something.
thing.
Polar,
Let me say something
I
about.
will give you a chance after Sarah.
She says he has nothing to say.
No. Edgar has described the NRM and he's a neutral actor here. Me, I'm an activist.
No, I'm an NRM leaning
yes.
commentator.
Thank you very much.
That's what they like to say.
I am a
But you see, they are reactionaries. Me, I'm a progressive NRM.
Yes, so I will say in summary. So Afanda which has said they are doing all they can to keep power, and that's why they are keeping power. And then I want to put it out to the viewers there.
I think
they are working day and night.
Which meant by in terms of service delivery.
Yes, no.
I am saying if we
They
are
are
not doing
working
the
very
right thing,
hard, and that's why they are keeping
I
power.
am here to say it for myself. Why are you saying it for me?
Okay, repeat it.
I'm saying we have the leadership, the capability, and we are doing good things for the people, and that is why the people have kept us here.
Okay, thank you very much. I will not comment on the leadership because Edgar has done that effectively. I have nothing to add on the leadership. I want to comment on the methods through which NRM is keeping power. Apart from having a crisis of leadership that has been demonstrated by Edgar interacted with all the NEC leaders and whatever, the methods keeping power. You know, we used to say that by hook or crook, but for them it's by crook and crook. Keeping power through torture, through kidnaps, through violence, through barbaric acts of the former professional army
It's a very unquantifiable word.
No, I will describe how I'm using those words.
Unquantified.
Let's just take a baseline of the last elections. How did NRM win elections? We did a day-to-day pictorial coverage of the presidential campaigns, right from nomination. On nomination day, 2 candidates are arrested. General Mugisha, a person who really, non-confrontation, everybody can testify. His campaigns were disrupted 46 times. He on the campaign trail of 2 months.
For Mugisha Moses?
Yes, we have a pictorial and we can publicize the link again. FDC candidate arrested 45 times. River only being nominated barefooted. And the way he was bundled by the army into the nomination center. From there, you come, arrest election observers, accredited election observers, detain them for 6 days. For observing elections, you accredited them to do. At the National Terror Center, it was like a chief general's meeting. There were no civilians. It was media and top generals guarding the National Terror Center. The violence by the army, the killings in Kampala unaccounted for. People's children murdered on Kampala streets unaccounted for. The shootings countrywide, especially around the Bobi Wine's campaigns. But then you say that you are working hard. Yes, by Kuruku and Kuruku, you are working hard to keep power.
But is that without history? I think every election in this country has been
Council. Let's
violent.
Has
But
been
why?
violent.
Let's give it a chance.
And I don't. Every election in this country has been
But
violent.
why?
And I don't see people who were brought to power through violence departing from that.
So you are confirming
that trajectory. I mean, I would be the last person to vouch for what would you call it, an electoral process in Uganda that is devoid of coercion and violence. I've seen it. I think it's part of our DNA. Whenever we're going for an election, it's like we're going for war. The words that all candidates, whether the incumbent or the ones contesting, it's always the campaign words are of violence, of war.
That confirms the leadership crisis.
of war. And I even wonder why we call it an election, quite frankly.
I want to
Let's say
respond
from
to
those who organize these
Tabaro's
elections.
point on.
He organizes elections.
No, the
I want to comment about
government
Tabaro's.
organizes
I wish would make a very good chairperson of the electoral commission. He's cool-headed.
No, I'm not only cool-headed, but that is the cadreship. I thank you that you notice I'm cool-headed, but I'm only cool-headed because I've grown up in NRM. That is the cadreship. That is the leadership all across. Okay, Sarah, you hear that?
Give us our
Now let me
handshakes.
comment about Tabaro's issue of the qualities of leadership that he interacted with. First of all, these are people among us. Two, so we expect them to be part of the population, even in other parties. Two is that they're at hierarchy level. So if you interacted at a national conference level, or even it says NEC, then you have a challenge of meeting calibers which are varied. For example, for a long time, the Local Government Act wanted to give academic qualifications for chairman LC3. And President Museveni said no. This is our population. If you give academic qualification to senior, say 6 or 4, you will lock out so many of our people. That is our people. Until our society adjumate and get to that level, then we can put such a thing. So we know this is our population. So I would expect a few slips in, because remember, at a NEC level, we have chairman LC5, and you know their qualification. The constituency flag bearers, the qualification is senior 6 or its equivalent.
Or it's equivalent.
So you can see how many people will go with the equivalent. And therefore also coupled with their exposure and experience, you don't expect a cadre the type of ANC that you would like to meet.
Yeah,
so
no,
that is what
let us compare with the CCM. CCM next door.
But over and above,
Even CNDD of Burundi that you've interacted with, I know you have interacted with them. I've sent them to you. Look at the cadreship that is emerging there.
therefore,
Look at it.
we have deliberately as a party even rejected the law that gives qualification, because we lock out many of our people. So this is our population, and that is how they are. But as hierarchy goes up, that's why we have, from the village level, we have the party organization, to the parish level, to the sub-county level, to the county level, to the district and above. So as you go up, the quality keeps purified. So we have no leadership issue there.
You don't see it as an issue.
I want us to
But
go
I
back
do.
to the gist
The
of the
topic.
matter, which is the question of DRC. So,
Yes,
retired Major, just,
Yeah,
just
you know
make
why
your
I
comment.
get to this? Because I'm just
Let him first
making
respond
a
briefly.
rebuttal.
Briefly.
And this is what circulates.
Yeah.
So if it is made and I don't make a rebuttal, it is unfair to me.
No,
So
fair
I
enough.
don't
Yeah,
import
fair
it.
enough. Yeah, you have to.
So
respond.
finally, this issue of killings on Kampala. Yesterday I met European Union ambassadors. All of them, they came to my office. They came to Secretariat. German, Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, all of them. Now, I brought to them that, you know, Kampala is not a city. It's almost a one-street city. Kampala Road, Bombo Road, Kampala Road, Jinja Road is one. It's not like Berlin where you move with a map. For somebody to say 55 people were killed on this street of less than 10 kilometers, that would mean at average of 1 kilometer, there are 5 dead
But
bodies.
that was a
It can't
government
happen.
report.
I
That
don't
was a
know that
government
kind
report.
of. No, I don't
Yeah,
want that
but go
report.
back to your government.
This is a one-street city. For somebody to allege that one day during campaign, 55 people died from Watoto to this roundabout of Mokwano. How?
That is a police
That is
report.
ridiculous.
That's a
Totally
police-
ridiculous. You
it's a
can't believe
police
that.
report.
That means every 1 kilometer, 5 dead bodies. How? So it's kind of this a very irresponsible assertion and should be taken with the contempt it
It's a
deserves.
police report. It's
Yeah.
a government report.
Now, the rest of leaders, you see, we failed to contextualize this, that we had an election during Corona period. And the SOPs, some of them were given by WHO, not even Uganda government. You could say pronouncement by government, but WHO was in the back of the, because they're protecting the health around the world.
Even the common sense. dictates that we should have followed certain SOPs.
Now, when these leaders don't follow and you arrest them, the Sarah said you have arrested them. These were clear provisions.
That's why I started with General Moses.
Now, Congo, you want me to go back to Congo?
Yeah, Congo. And my question is, as we get back to Congo, is that let's paint a picture on the human rights issues, but also the aspect of the refugee spillover. As we wrap this up and move towards Kenya. So let's just paint a picture in just maybe 5 minutes, then we can shift gears a bit. So in your own words, what is the human rights status, but also the refugee spillover? How are member states within the community dealing with the aspect of refugees? Is Uganda being left with the burden to deal with refugees, or other member states are also owning up and saying that this is our community, and therefore, if there is a spillover, then all countries should have maybe an open-based policy?
You know, on human rights issue, generally the intricacies in DRC, I came for this discussion thinking that Tabaro should do justice to it. And he has done it. Because he knows it, he has taken a lot of interest, he still takes a lot of interest in it. So he would say it better than me. But human rights in DRC is violations in all formats. Even if you take it from the conventions that UN has, Convention on the Rights of the Child, total violation. Women, total violation.
Minorities,
meaning like economic and cultural, social, and whatever violations. Whether disability, violations. For example, refugees who come from DRC, you hear very troubling things like some people say you wake up in a night and you find a whole village is dead. Some people even think there are people who are testing machines or something in Congo. So when you talk of violations of human rights in DRC, it's something the world should come around and think about. People come, some of us just withhold the information. You hear it and you just feel like, maybe I don't even mention this. But I do mention some of them because it is reports from refugees who are received in the camps. Some of them talk of waking up one day in a village in Congo and you find the entire village is dead.
God.
You don't even know what has killed them. So the violations are terrible. Now when it comes to refugees, I think the Eastern DRC are just lucky that they have Uganda. Because Uganda, for a long time, we are #1 in refugee, in the entire world, refugee friendliness.
Policy.
And policy. Of late, we have been overtaken by Turkey. Turkey is now #1 in the world. Because they get from Syria, they get from this, and their policy is good. But we were #1 for a long time. So DRC is only lucky that we are here. And our policies, since time immemorial. Do you remember that you are young, you don't know? Even during a Amin's regime, if a Ugandan was in Kenya, you can't walk on the street during a Amin's regime. They would ask you for...
Moye expelled Ugandan refugees.
They would ask you in Nairobi. No way, you couldn't walk there. Even in Tanzania, where I went, we were put in camps.
Because we have taken sides.
We are put in camps. Even in Tanzania, we're in camps. So the friendly there you find in Kisenyi, our brothers from Somalia, you don't get it in any part of the world.
Kisenyi is Somalia, Kabalagala, Eritrea. You go a little ahead, Ethiopians.
So we are so friendly.
Congolese, Bunga.
So that is what has helped them. That's what has helped them. The only thing now is, while we help them, we need to go back to, I think, what Sarah knows best, resource control. Because sometimes the resources are available for these refugees, and we therefore call upon proper management of these resources. Because it has been hard time and again that there's misappropriation of the resources meant for the refugees. We have the policies, Ugandans have the goodwill. No Ugandan meets you and finds you a Congolese and even better, so abuses you that you're foreign. Which Ugandan can abuse a foreigner here? Natural thing, that is what we are. So, but now the challenge there moves in the resource control, which we really have to put up, and all government organs concerned should pull up their socks so that resources are available.
I've seen
just Edgar, I was coming to you actually, and as we explore the aspect of refugees, perhaps let's examine how refugee spillover could be a source for potential domestic conflict in itself.
Definitely,
domestic here,
because now if you have national resources going towards refugees, what does that mean for the...
But mainly these are donated.
But you see, there are other resources like land, land, environment. Because when we have an influx of refugees, the degradation of the ecosystem, the ecosystem. First of all, it puts pressure on the land, on the resources. Even for, they are usually allocated some plots of land to grow some
grow,
food
yeah.
crops. So the soils get
Subsistence,
exhausted.
yeah.
There is
But there's also competition with schools.
environmental degradation. And of course, there are other things that you don't see on air, but like prostitution and its impact on the social relations in communities. It places a lot of strain on our resources, and we've seen it in the Chisoro, where my parents come from, and I interact with people
And
from
you?
there
You
regularly.
don't come from there?
I'm a settler in Toro Kingdom.
Mufurich.
Yeah, exactly. If you so wish to call me so. So
Migrant. Mufurich simply means migrant.
yes, but
Migrant.
But a special migrant because he was Attorney General
of the kingdom. So
You're the
yes. So that's my domicile. That's my domicile of choice. So in Chisoro, there's a reception center at Nyakabande, and you see the material that is introduced there that is not supposed to be in that environment, the disposal of wastes and what have you, but also the violence, organized crime that we see that is associated with the M23. We've had many robberies, the homicides we used to have in Chisoro, where homicides saying the heat of a moment, people are fighting over land or maybe
a woman?
Passion, crime of passion. Spear a person and the person dies. Really not intentional, but premeditated, planned killing using weapons, firearms was never. So there's been a market change in criminality there, and it's been attributed to the presence of some of those refugees and gangsters or bandits from that part of the world. So we whether we want it or not, DRC is going to continue to be in our faces. It's supposed to have been our biggest trading partner by this time, but like all things Ugandan, we plan. When we go to act, we take many times what they call the steps we take.
One step forward, 3 steps back.
Yeah, that's the politest we can put it. We take steps towards addressing trade, then, you see certain formations and diplomatic maneuvers that are reversing the very things that we've set out to do. And quite frankly, it takes us aback because there's much to achieve as a region, as a country and as a region, where the DRC to stabilize. Believe me, there's much that we can achieve. There's much that we can promote between ourselves because there are certain things in the DRC that will not about to happen. We have been under visionary leadership for the last 36. How many years have we done of Museveni? 37 years. 37 years of President Museveni.
Although I had him speak of 60 years.
Yeah, for NASA, from the time he was at Intare School. Yes, from the time, he says 1966.
That is okay. The record should be straight. From my school, from Intare School, where the struggle started.
Okay. Since 1986, there are certain things, even under stable government, that we have not been able to do and achieve or acquire. So you can imagine Congo that has had a spiral of violence since 1970. I was born in 1976, since 1977. 46 years of total absence of government. Believe me, it will take them time to establish their own capacity for industry. So that part of the world, that part of Africa, will continue to be, for the next foreseeable future, a market for Ugandan produced goods. So the best thing for us to do, if we are to continue growing our economy, if we want to stabilize this country, if we want to create more jobs for our people, the stability of the DRC is critical for the social, economic, and the political stability of Uganda.
All right. Thank you very much. Doctor, I'll give you a chance to make comments.
Take part factors to assess.
To make comments regarding the refugee spillover, but also set pace for us regarding the Republic of Kenya. We have seen Raila Odinga come out to declare the 20th of March a public holiday, and that they are going to march to State House in protest of the high living standards in Kenya, but also that the Ruto administration has failed to deal with issues around the economy generally. But also we have seen the deputy president saying that the time is now to deal with the Odinga confusion in Kenya. So as you give your comments regarding the refugee spillover, let us shift gears to Kenya. But also we know that Kenya has now officially lifted its ban on Uganda's powdered milk. So your comments on that as we shift gears to evaluate Kenya and new developments there.
On refugees and human rights, really, it's a crisis. It's I saw the president of DRC in the recent press conference with Emmanuel Macron, that went viral, where he was telling France that they need to be respected, even as they negotiate, trying to solve their problems. A journalist had made the careless comment, and I was happy really that.
He pointed at him.
Yes,
really.
I was really happy that
he took on Macron.
He could assert himself.
He took on Macron
I saw
at a press conference at the DS.
Yes, I saw.
Who was that again?
Secretary and Macron.
Macron.
Okay.
I saw the same Kabila Jr. assert himself in a Heads of State Summit on Great Lakes, where he where he told his neighbors that he's not a boy, and he's a president of a sovereign country, and they better be careful what they say in that summit. They should talk about their countries and not his. He's representing his country. By then, the neighbors had thought that was their good son, and they would dictate on what he does. And
well, he had the support of Kikwete then.
Yeah, and he assured them
confidence.
that he's not their child, and they are all equals in that room. So it is good when you see the such leaders asserting themselves, and they shouldn't just stop at that. They should
offer. It could also be an inferiority.
They should offer solid. They should offer solid leadership to their citizens and the countries they lead. I want to go to the Kenyan situation where temperatures are rising, with the threats of demonstrations over the cost of living, but also pending issues, arising out of elections that are being demanded for, like the demand to open the servers by Azimio for Ruto to prove whether he was duly elected by the people or he got his victory through courts of law. And this comes at the time when the Supreme Court has issued a controversial decision on homosexuality. And they are also at a weaker point in terms of being punched by legislators, by big advocates in Kenya, by religious leaders. And I think there are 3 applications for the Supreme Court to review their decision on that freedom of association for gay persons. So you have Kenya that offers a mixed situation of hope and a worry. I don't want to call it fear, because I believe they can still address their controversies. We, having observed the elections in Kenya, and especially, I just came from a meeting where I represented the Eastern and Horn of Africa in Washington on a democracy trends in Africa and generally the global trends and what citizens need to do. So you have Kenya offering hope in terms of progress they've made in terms of civic competencies of people. The elite are in charge directly in the elections. the stakeholders in terms of the economy are participants in the election, in the politics of Kenya. So you can't worry, even when we are saying temperatures are rising, you can't worry that Azimio will burn Kenya down, or Nairobi, or Mombasa. No. You find half of the streets are owned by Azimio stakeholders, others is Kenya Kwanza. So they own the economy. So what I like about Kenya is that people who own the economy and the elite, as compared to Uganda, the serious elite are actively engaged in politics.
So you agreed with me?
Yes. In our situation, we have the mediocre people actively engaged in politics. And I find it's a crisis, and we need to deal with it.
In Uganda, we promote and celebrate mediocrity.
Yes.
It is.
Political leaders are
it's a national
mediocres.
shame.
And we can
shame.
run away from it, we can defend it, but the facts speak for themselves. So so as much as we say Kenya, temperatures are rising, they can't ban their country. They are the top stakeholders. So the demands, I watched
And it's across the political divide, by the way.
Yeah.
Any political party you go to, you'll find the finest brain.
Yes.
Finest
They are
brain.
the ones in charge of, and that creates a difference.
We've talked about it here before. The second liberation of Kenya, the multipartyism, the ushering, all these reforms you see in Kenya, the constitution, they were pushed by the elite, industrialists, businessmen, environmentalists, professors at the university. They never.
Top lawyers.
They were never at the periphery.
No.
They were at the forefront of this, and they made personal sacrifices. Some people lost fortunes.
Yeah.
Ken Matiba, he was a very rich Kikuyu man with, Diani owned the beachfront in Mombasa. But he was beaten, clobbered, and went into a vegetative state for the rest of his life. We had, who was this guy of Safina Party? Paul Mwite. Tom Mwite, Richard Leakey. Richard Leakey he was amputated because of demonstrating. He was amputated, lost his whatever. Paul Mwite, he was a very senior lawyer.
Tom Mboya.
No, that's the earlier time.
But current actors, they're top notch.
Top notch.
So in our country, it's a reverse.
It's the reverse. You
look for credentials of people, and you're like, you need a microscope to see who they are.
And it's a conclusion I've come to as a result of many interactions within the NRM. And I'll not talk about the other political parties because,
It's a no starter.
Man, we are okay. Let me tell you, we really have a we are at a crisis. We're in a crisis.
At least the NRM, others it's a no starter.
We are in a crisis. NRM, I'm telling you, I've interacted with them very
lawyers and generals who are educated.
Yes, but at
not only general, but a lawyer.
Many of them are at the peripheries. And others have just basically resigned themselves to
that's our method of work.
Of what?
That's
tearing people down.
Somebody is quiet, but is actively
they
involved.
front mediocres.
The other parties really.
So when you go to the issues being raised, the high cost of living, in the run-up to the elections.
Just imagine you're carrying out an election for the leadership of the convocation of an institution as important as Makerere.
For the Tower of Africa, and the army is grabbing people. The
candidates.
But our moderators left at police.
The candidates who offered themselves.
I have a very good friend called Charles Odong. So we advised him to pull out of the damn thing. Imagine Charles Odong. So you've interacted with Charles. Imagine his name being associated with that scuffle over. Man. I'm happy he stepped up. It's and that is who we are.
Yeah,
that's Uganda.
Oh my God.
Believe me, we are in a crisis.
Okay. It's a mess, but if I may finish
on speaking about Kenya.
Yes.
But
we must compare.
We must compare.
You have come back to Uganda again.
Yeah, this is where we are. This is our country.
For a rebuttal and they say,
this is our country. So when you look at the issues being raised, the biggest issue is the high cost of living. And then the secondary issue is the contested legitimacy of Ruto. And yesterday he spoke toughly on the so-called holiday.
20th of
Yes,
it is treason.
Yeah,
It's an act of treason.
yeah, I don't know. And
He says they're going to march on what?
20th.
And march where?
To State House.
What is that?
Yeah, but maybe they want to meet the president. March to do what?
Why would you go with the whole 1 million
No,
people?
but I don't know. I want to do, yeah. So I saw the toughness with the Ruto. Of course, he has to assert himself as a president. Today, I watched a show where church leaders were saying that they want the question of servers resolved, that the contested legitimacy should be answered.
But that was a court decision.
No, I know, but wait,
You know,
they are saying, no,
was
Edgar
just
is
thinking
coming.
under what
I'm just
procedure?
reporting
Under
what
what
the
procedure?
issues are.
Yes, those are the issues.
I
but
want to give insights on what the issues
the
are.
underlying issue is the style of politics of Raila.
And
He has
how to
been a
shift
rabble
gears.
rouser.
Let me shift, Edgar, let me
I have
shift.
to- I have to
Let
go
me
to Edgar,
conclude
yes,
so that,
as
because
wrap
but
up.
I'm being
Okay,
interrupted.
Masho, please.
So the issues they are saying that the servers, why can't they be opened? That was a representative of the religious leader. And then, of course, the representative of Kenya Kwanza was saying we are in charge, the Supreme Court ruled. That's a done deal. Prepare for the next election.
That's what should be.
Yeah. So then the Secretary General of ODM, who was on the show, and also the leader, I think, minority leader in the Senate, who said, yes, you are in charge, but we also have our constitutional freedoms. This is a freedom of assembly and association. And we are saying we are raising our issues that should be addressed. So if you are in charge, can you address the cost of living? How come if I say I'm going to march in my constituents, I'm not marching alone? Why are people following me? Then the people who voted for Kenya Kwanza, we are also coming up, especially the leaders in Uhuru's, the Mount Kenya. They are saying we think we made a mistake, and then it is troubling. So the religious leaders were saying, whatever it is, we are not saying do a handshake like Uhuru did with Raila, but we must have a conversation. And these are the two leaders. You all have almost equal support, and especially knowing that even without the contested legitimacy, it was a margin of 200,000 people that led to victory.
268,000.
Yeah, so it's around 268.
68.
Yeah, so it is so it's a very small margin. So you can't allow continued polarization of a
It
country
was equal.
because you need to lead also a conducive environment.
I really agree,
How to
and
bring
she
in,
she has a deeper insight than me on the details, because I wouldn't want to call her a player, but she's been an observer. She has been an observer there, and I think it all boils down to the character of Raila Odinga. He has been a rabble rouser all through. That's his style of politics all through. He went into solitary. What was it called? It's not solitary confinement. For
Under Moi.
Under Moi, 7.5 years or 8.5 years. Because he's believed to have been behind the mastermind behind the coup attempt in 1982, August 1982.
By the Air Force.
By the Air Force, by Luos basically. It was Luos.
Luo Air Force.
And this is the background I want to give, and that's the reason why Uhuru made every attempt to bury the hatchet and reach out to the Luos. It's a coalition that was crafted by Mama Ngina, saying, flowing from her husband's feud with the late Oginga Odinga in 1969, where you know those Kisumu riots and resulting hordes of Luos dying, and the animosity purging of the system of all Luos who were educated were really put sidelined, including Obama's father, who ended up dying of depression as a result of addiction to alcohol and cigarettes. So given that background and having an evenly divided election, which could have gone either way, I thought, given that background, Ruto would be more magnanimous towards the Luo community, and in particular his opponent. But he came out belligerent. He behaved like a victor, and a victor takes it all, and treating the other people as the vanquished. And that kind of politics, believe me, in a country that is ethnically and that evenly divided in an election,
Yeah.
where the election is not very clear.
Yeah, it's almost
Belligerence is not a line that he should have pursued. Secondly, I mean, out a cabinet of how many? There are only 2 laws. 2?
in his cabinet.
Yes, and
they are not checked.
yeah, and very, very peripheral positions. I mean, the Luo nation you cannot wish them away. You cannot wish them away. And you can't have stability in Kenya without having the Luos on your side. So, and politics in this part of the world, honestly, is like horse trading. Eh? It's what a Buganda would say, mpankuwe. You should, trade off certain things. Belligerence does not help in such circumstances. And I do hope, because Kenya is not like DRC, Kenya is far too important to the ecosystem, the economic ecosystem of the region. Many of us rely on Mombasa. Many of the international finance capital, the financial institutions and the industrial capitals of the Western world chose Kenya as their African headquarters. So there's much more at stake. And already you see the Kenya shilling is taking a battering.
A battering. I wanted also to mention that the citizens are concerned about expenditures.
And you see,
especially the money being spent on religious leaders and.
But you see, the other thing is that
half a million dollars has been spent on religious leaders in State House.
Between 2016 and 2021, 2016 and 2022, when Uhuru was in power, Kenya grew from 69 billion US dollar to 108. Within 6 years, they nearly doubled the size of the economy. But they also borrowed so much up to the ceiling, to the extent that they can't borrow anymore for their infrastructure development. Their roads, the standard gauge railway,
express highway to the airport.
They've done great things, but they are heavily indebted. Then 2, what would I call it? I don't want to sound politically incorrect on television, particularly given my background as a lawyer. But, I'll put it plainly. He removed the condition of declaring source of money when you're depositing it in the bank. You're supposed to declare the origin of the money, the source, when you're depositing in a bank. By removing that simple thing, some more money was injected in the economy. But they do not have hard currency. They don't have dollars.
You know, and business.
But they don't have dollars. I mean, you remember this is also an import economy. They heavily rely on import. And with the disruption of supply chain processes as a result of the Ukraine war. And remember, we have a spillover from from the COVID lockdown. We have what they call backlog.
But those are general conditions.
Yeah, those are general conditions. But for Kenya, they didn't even have money to import fuel reserves. And when President Suluhu mentioned that there's a country that doesn't have even forex reserves, forex reserves even for 1 week, they thought she was referring to Kenya, but she was, I think, actually referring to Burundi, because Burundi has such endemic problems. So really, Ruto has to come out of his belligerence. He's president for those who voted him and those who didn't vote him. For him to continue speaking like a victor, speaking to the vanquished in a society like Kenya, where everything is seen in terms of ethnicity, I don't think is the right strategy.
He needs to tone down on his arrogance.
Thank you. Yes. Well, Major,
that's
your
my
comments,
language.
Our time is fast spent, so you have some minutes to make your comments regarding Kenya.
Well, Kenya is, I agree with the Tabaro worries. Even if you put in a worst case scenario, assuming you have guerrilla warfare in Kenya, where railway lines are disrupted and roads are disrupted, would definitely feel the pain. So it is our wish that Kenya is stable, and it is our wish that they use all the democratic means to resolve their problems. But again, hearing from my colleagues the details of their reserve, their borrowing, their all this, now confirms what we have been saying, that we are very much better. We have our reserves are...
No, Uganda has a resilient economy, no doubt.
We are
much better.
Much better.
Not by design, it's by default.
No, nothing can go by default. If there was a failure, you'd want us to take. You see,
No, you want to take credit.
You
for-
want to
you want to take
when
credit for.
when something is good,
We
you don't
cannot
want us
go
to
and
take
celebrate
credit.
the
When it
sunshine.
is bad, you want us to.
Yeah, Uganda's economy is resilient.
Nothing is
yeah,
self-sufficient.
we are.
And
are
So
mainly
you're
resilient.
because
hearing,
of agriculture.
hearing what is in Kenya.
And not because of agricultural intervention strategies. Our people.
Of course.
Our people.
They engaged in
And in agriculture.
And now,
Yeah.
this brings me to the issue that I've been saying here again and again. You see, I've been questioning why Article 1 is never taken advantage of by the citizens of Uganda. Power belongs to the people. I have always repeatedly said, it's not that people are not aware about that, but the material condition provided for the conducive atmosphere does not make people take that option.
So
people are okay.
Is that why?
Now,
Is that why they say fools can survive in Uganda?
You see what because
Because we are foolish.
No, first of all,
No,
you are,
I mean the head of state believes we are foolish.
first of all,
That is a session and addressing a foreign audience.
And in the foreign
A foreign audience, and
we
I
are
selected
foolish.
the
We are
audience of elite business people, business and industry.
Private sector.
and he was right.
That we are foolish?
We are foolish
No,
and
what
lazy.
he said is this. He said, because of the conducive atmosphere in Uganda, even a fool can survive. Because
But he also said
look at
we are
the situation. If you are in Finland,
That was in addition to
if
saying
you
that
are in
we are
Finland,
lazy.
Sarah, you first need a lot of winter clothing. You need all these things. How will you survive? But here you can even walk and pick a mango from the bush. You can pick oranges from everywhere.
That is the resilience I'm talking about. Is it by
It's
design?
not
Is it by design or by
Are you the
default?
one planting mangoes in the bush?
that is
But
what-
Awich,
in my
come
place, there are
by
mangoes in the
the
bush.
Yeah, but is
No,
it?
Sarah, which part of Uganda? Mine, there are mangoes in the mangoes.
And the government had planted
There are
them.
mangoes in the
And
bush.
the government had planted them.
Yes.
So during war,
No. So what I'm
default,
saying
not
is,
by design.
I am saying that you now see Kenya with the threat of exercising their power under Article 1, which has not been the case in Uganda because the situation in Uganda is different. We have managed it. How have we managed? Even by mere venting yourself, here Sarah can come and say all sorts of things. It was trending last week. But so how would you have Sarah on the street when she has already spoken here? She won't go to the street because she speaks everywhere.
We
So
allow
that is
people
the
to vent.
difference. Yeah,
But
people vent.
I've had activists being kidnapped and tortured.
Those are cases of people
Exactly.
with
And by the way, let me tell you,
cases.
I'm one person who believes in venting. Venting is curative.
So Sarah has
It's
already
therapeutic.
vented. Why
cathartic.
would she go to the
The anger will have gone away.
Yeah.
Now, why don't you
So that is the difference.
Why don't you
that
teach
we
other
have.
people in the NRM to adopt that reasoning of yours?
That is the
That
position.
is my
of-
quarrel.
Why
That
are
is the position
why
of
they
Kenya.
kidnapping and torturing?
That's the position. So in Kenya, Mr. Moderator, I said it is sad that we get fear around Kenyan situation. All our, not all our life, but our life is closely connected to them.
Economy.
And I give the example of a worst case scenario of a rebellion where railway lines are destroyed and roads are not, we would be in serious situation. But also I said, hearing the detailed data that is there, that now explained to Ugandans how we are much, much better.
Okay, thank you. Well, unfortunately, our time is fast spent. We cannot now delve into making comments regarding the President's address. So I'll just invite parting shots regarding this particular topic only. So, retired Major, still from you as I come towards Dr. Sarah.
Okay. For the topic of the day, DRC equally is worrying. We wish them well, but all stakeholders should participate. And we have seen that there are varied stakeholders. The human rights violations there is also worrying. I've already illustrated that you wake up we have reports of refugees, you wake up one day and the whole village is dead. So we need to we as actors and the international community need to do something. Back in Uganda, we shall continue as a party, we shall continue to do what the people want, and we shall move on as we execute the mandate given to us for the 5 years. We hope to do better, and we hope by our performance in the next election we shall be brought back.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Council.
Not by use of the gun, but by our performance.
Enhanced by the gun.
Not enhanced by the
I've always used this mantra. I've developed this statement to the level of mantra. All the things, the beautiful things that we talk about, the beautiful things that we set out to do or wish for our country, and by extension this region, shall not happen unless we are intentional, deliberate, and purposeful. There's no way all these aspirations that we carry, that are written in the preamble to the Uganda's constitution, background and preamble to the Uganda's constitution, to the EAC treaty, to the Nairobi conclave, round of discussions for talks between M23 and, incidentally, it is not even M23, it's Kinshasa and Kigali. It appeared Kigali was representing M23, it was the official representative from the look of things. Now, those preambles, the beautiful statements they communicate, will not translate into realism and reality unless we are intentional, we are deliberate and purposeful. They are not going to fall from the sky. They will remain abstract, and in those papers, in those books, in those beautifully printed out pamphlets, to gather dust while circulating on the internet between social media groups and people discussing but creating no impact. So we've got to be purposeful. We've got to be purposeful. We have to be intentional and have the presence of our minds in driving that mindset. And I always tell people that for us to transit, for us to transform, we have to develop the mindset of transformation. It's like having an Android operating system and you populate it with Apple apps, iPhone apps. The two technologies can't talk. So what is happening in the DRC, what is happening in the region is a disjuncture between the handset and the operating system that we're deploying. For so long as we continue the path that we are taking, we are going to end in total disaster. And I'll conclude by saying that if we fail to prepare, we shall prepare to what? To fail.
Dr. Sarah, you got the last words.
I will borrow the words of Kwame Nkrumah. Seek ye first the political kingdom, and the rest shall be added unto you. The East African integration process has tried to progress on a political front, on an economic front, but with the complete degeneration at the political leadership level. And the political leaders are bound to derail, if they haven't yet, the economic efforts of private sector. Yet private sector is an engine for growth in any country that is aiming at achieving sustainable development. So the question of DRC, the question of Kenya, the questions we are battling with back home are leadership questions, are political questions that the citizens must resolve. Without stable political leadership, the economic efforts will not go far. I know that the citizens have always integrated, especially in Africa, ahead of governments. And that's why you see the economic integration is ahead. It's not just, is ahead of all the other integration processes.
And that is the way to go.
And it has always been like that. But what I'm saying is that the political leadership needed to put their act in order.
Well, we cannot explore all about the East African region because, of course, there are so many countries. But, well, that is it from us on that particular topic. Thank you very much, Retired Major. Thank you, Council Edgar, and, of course, Dr.
Not looking at retirement anytime soon. I'm like Kahindo Tafiri.
That is right. You can serve the people, but you don't have to be in political leadership. Serve the people.
Well, thank you very much.
We are serving the people here.
Thank you very much, Doctor, and our panelists. To the viewers, thank you for making a date with us every Friday afternoon. We always love to bring you content, but of course, a very valuable knowledge at the same time. From us to you, we say have a lovely Friday afternoon. See you next week, same time, same place.